Hi and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. I'm here to tell you a story about love, the kind of all-consuming, world-defining love that poets write about and cynics scoff at. For 20 years, I was not a cynic. I was a true believer. My love for my wife, Lyra, was the sun my entire universe orbited around. I built my life, my business, my very identity around the simple, profound truth of that love. And then I was asked to prove it. I was asked to make a sacrifice, to burn down the entire world I had built on the altar of my devotion, to save her. I did it without hesitation. I torched my past and my future to buy her a few more precious months in the present. It was only after the smoke cleared and the ashes cooled that I discovered the fire was a lie. The altar was a stage, and the woman I had sacrificed everything for was not a dying angel, but the arsonist who had handed me the match. Our life before the diagnosis was, by any objective measure, perfect. We were a portrait of quiet, successful love. I had built a successful architectural firm from the ground up, a business that was not just a source of income but a creative passion. Lyra was my partner in every sense of the word. She was the firm's business manager, the steady, brilliant mind that handled the finances and operations, freeing me to focus on design and vision. We were a formidable team. We lived in a house I had designed myself, a structure of glass and cedar nestled in a quiet wooded lot, every line and angle a testament to our shared aesthetic and the life we had built within its walls. It was more than a house. It was a repository of our memories, a physical manifestation of our partnership. Our love was the kind of deep, comfortable intimacy that is forged over 2 decades. We could communicate with a glance, finish each other's sentences, anticipate each other's needs. She was my confidant, my best friend, the steady rhythm my heart beat in time with. My devotion to her was absolute, a fundamental law of my own personal physics. I would have done anything for her, and she, I believed with every fiber of my being, would have done the same for me. The end of that world began on a Tuesday in October. It started with what seemed like a minor health issue, fatigue, a strange tingling in her hands. We went to our family doctor, who ran some tests and referred us to a specialist. The specialist referred us to another, and with each new appointment the atmosphere grew heavier, the language more clinical and evasive. We found ourselves in the sterile, beige office of a renowned oncologist, a man with kind eyes and a voice full of practiced, gentle gravity. He pulled up the images from her scans, a series of abstract, monochrome shapes that meant nothing to me, and then he gave them a name. He called it neuromyoclonic sarcoma, a rare, aggressive, and insidious cancer that intertwined itself with the central nervous system. The words were a foreign language, but the meaning was brutally clear. The prognosis, he explained, was 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, with aggressive, debilitating chemotherapy that would diminish, not enhance, the quality of her remaining time. I remember the world dissolving into a low, buzzing hum. The doctor's voice became a distant drone. The only thing I could see, the only thing that was real, was Lyra's hand in mine. Her fingers were cold and her knuckles were white. I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw not just fear but a profound, soul-deep terror. And in that instant my own shock and grief were incinerated by a new, white-hot emotion, a ferocious, primal determination. I would not accept this. I would not let the world take her from me. That night, after we returned home to the beautiful house that now felt like a mausoleum, I did not sleep. I sat at my computer, the glow of the screen a lonely beacon in the oppressive darkness, and I fell into the rabbit hole of late-night, desperate medical research. I typed the name of her disease into every search engine, every medical forum, every clinical trial database I could find. For hours, I waded through a sea of grim statistics and heartbreaking anecdotes. And then I found it. A single, flickering candle in the abyss. It was a link to a private clinic in Switzerland, the Clinic Edelweiss. It was a sleek, professional website filled with testimonials and complex scientific explanations. They specialized in something they called somatic gene resequencing therapy, a revolutionary experimental treatment for rare and aggressive cancers. It was not approved in the United States. It was astronomically expensive, and it was, according to them, a potential cure. The head of the clinic, a Dr. Ulrich Weber, had a biography that read like a Nobel laureate's. His picture exuded confidence and brilliant compassion. I found a video of him giving a lecture, his voice a soothing, authoritative baritone as he spoke of hope, of fighting the impossible, of a new frontier in medicine. This was it. This was our lifeline. I showed it to Lyra the next morning. The hope that ignited in her eyes was all the confirmation I needed. We had a video consultation with Dr. Weber a few days later. He was everything his biography promised: brilliant, empathetic, and utterly convincing. He reviewed Lyra's scans, spoke of her specific case with an impressive familiarity, and laid out the treatment plan. It would be arduous. It would be expensive. But he believed, he said with a quiet, profound confidence, that Lyra was a perfect candidate. He believed he could save her. The cost was staggering, a number so large it seemed abstract. It was far beyond what our health insurance would even consider covering. We would have to liquidate everything. I looked at Lyra, at the hope warring with the fear in her eyes, and I didn't hesitate for a second. What was a business? What was a house? They were just things, collections of wood and glass and paper. They were meaningless compared to a single extra day with her. The great dismantling began. I started with the business, the firm I had poured my heart and soul into for 15 years. I sold my majority stake to my junior partner for a fraction of its true value, a quick sale for immediate cash. The day I signed the papers, I felt a pang of loss, but it was overshadowed by a sense of righteous purpose. Every dollar was another brick in the wall we were building against death. Next was our investment portfolio, the nest egg we had so diligently built for our retirement. I watched years of careful planning and disciplined saving vanish in a series of clicks, the money transferred from our secure future into a high-risk, desperate present. The hardest part was the house, our home. I hired a real estate agent who specialized in quick cash sales to anonymous investors. I walked through the rooms for the last time, every corner saturated with a memory. The kitchen where we danced while making dinner, the living room where we'd celebrated Christmases, the bedroom where we had shared 20 years of secrets and dreams. I was selling our history, but I told myself I was buying our future. I sold our cars, her jewelry, my collection of rare architectural books. I became a machine of liquidation, converting every physical object of our shared life into the cold, liquid hope of currency. Lyra, in her growing weakness, watched with a kind of sad, beautiful gratitude. She would hold my hand and tell me I was her hero, that my love was the only thing keeping her alive. Her words were the fuel that kept me going, that silenced the small, nagging voice of doubt in the back of my mind. Within 2 months, it was done. Our life as we knew it had been converted into a single number in a bank account. I made the first wire transfer to the clinic Edelweiss, a massive down payment for the treatment to begin. I felt a terrifying, exhilarating lightness. We had nothing left but each other. We were standing on a precipice with no safety net, having bet everything we had on a single, desperate chance. But as I held her in my arms that night in our empty, echoing house, I felt no regret. I had proven my love. I had burned down the world for her, and I was ready to do it again if I had to. The months that followed were a descent into a strange, hermetic world defined by the rhythms of her illness. Our beautiful house was gone, replaced by a small, furnished rental apartment that felt like a sterile waiting room for the final act of our lives. My world, which had once been filled with blueprints, client meetings, and the complex challenges of running a business, shrank to the size of her sickbed. I became her full-time caregiver, a role I embraced with the same obsessive dedication I had once reserved for my career. Every moment of my day was structured around her needs, her medication schedule, her carefully prepared meals, her comfort. Lyra's performance was a masterpiece of tragic, brave suffering. She grew progressively weaker, her body seemingly succumbing to the ravages of the fictional disease. Some days she was too fatigued to get out of bed. On others, she would be racked with pain from the treatment. her face a mask of quiet agony. I would hold her, sponge her forehead with a cool cloth, and read to her for hours, my voice a low, steady anchor in the storm I believed she was enduring. She never complained. She would smile weakly up at me, her eyes full of a heartbreaking gratitude, and tell me that my love was the only medicine that truly mattered. Her courage, her grace in the face of this monstrous disease only deepened my devotion. I saw her as a saint, a beautiful, tragic figure, and I was her humble, tireless servant. Our contact with the outside world was minimal. Dr. Weber and the clinic Edelweiss became our sole lifeline. We would receive weekly progress reports via email, documents filled with complex medical charts and encouraging but technical jargon. The somatic resequencing was working, they claimed. Her tumor markers were decreasing. The cancer was responding. Each report was a shot of adrenaline, a dose of hope that justified the catastrophic cost. We had regular video calls with Dr. Weber, who would appear on the screen in his pristine white coat, his Swiss Alps screensaver visible behind him, his voice a steady, reassuring balm. He would praise Lyra for her resilience and me for my unwavering support, calling us a remarkable team. I clung to his words, replaying his reassurances in my mind during the long, dark nights. The money continued to flow out, a torrent of wire transfers to the Swiss account, each one corresponding to a new phase of the treatment. I never questioned it. I was in too deep. To question the clinic would be to question the entire foundation of my sacrifice, to admit that the world I had burned down might have been for nothing. I couldn't face that possibility. My belief had to be absolute. And then, after 6 months of this grueling, suspended existence, the email we had been praying for arrived. It was from Dr. Weber. I read it with trembling hands, my heart pounding in my chest. The final scans were in. The results were, in his words, nothing short of miraculous. The cancer was gone, not just in remission, but completely eradicated. The experimental treatment had been a resounding success. A wave of elation so powerful it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. I burst into the bedroom where Lyra was resting, the printout of the email clutched in my hand like a holy scripture. I told her the news, my voice choked with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. We clung to each other, sobbing, a messy, beautiful explosion of relief and gratitude. We had done it. We had faced death and we had won. The sacrifice had been worth it. My love had been enough. The weeks that followed were a euphoric blur. Lyra's recovery was astonishingly rapid. The weakness and fatigue that had plagued her for months seemed to melt away overnight. Within a week, she was walking around the apartment, her old energy returning. Within a month, she looked healthier than she had in years. I attributed it to the miracle of the treatment and the resilience of her spirit. We were broke. We had no home, no business, but we had each other. And that felt like the greatest wealth in the world. We started talking about the future, about rebuilding. I was full of plans, eager to start again from scratch with her by my side. But this was where the first, almost imperceptible crack appeared in the facade of our miracle. When I talked about starting a new, smaller architectural practice, or looking for a small plot of land to build a new home, Lyra's responses were vague, non-committal. She would change the subject or plead exhaustion from her recovery, a claim that was beginning to feel less and less plausible given her vibrant appearance. I brushed it off as post-traumatic stress, her reluctance to plan a future when she had so recently been denied one. But other small, dissonant notes began to sound. She became very protective of her new phone, taking calls in the other room, her voice a low, secretive murmur. When I asked who it was, she would say it was a friend from a cancer support group she had joined online, someone who understood what she had been through. It made sense, and yet it felt off. Then there was the mail. A letter arrived from a financial services company I had never heard of, addressed to her under her maiden name. I placed it on the counter, and when she saw it, she snatched it up quickly, a flicker of something, annoyance, panic, in her eyes before she forced a smile and tucked it into her purse. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my gut. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the past year had left me emotionally scarred, seeing shadows where there was only light. I was so desperate to believe in our miracle in her that I willingly suppressed my own intuition. The moment of undeniable truth, the one that shattered my willful ignorance, came from a simple, mundane task. I was cleaning out a drawer and found an old tablet of hers that we had forgotten about. I powered it on, intending to wipe it clean. Her email account was still logged in. Out of a habit I couldn't explain, I typed Dr. Weber into the search bar, wanting to reread the old progress reports to relive the journey of our victory. The familiar emails came up, but so did something else. It was an email thread in her trash folder, a folder she must have forgotten to empty. The thread was not with Dr. Weber. It was with a man I didn't know, a man named Caspian. The subject line was Edelweiss Project. I opened it, my blood turning to ice. The emails were a series of logistical discussions. There were links to a web designer in another country who had built the clinic's website. There were attachments of stock photos of doctors and medical equipment. There was a discussion about the best way to fake clinical charts. And then there was the final email from her to this Caspian, sent the day after we had received the miraculous news. It read, Phase 1 complete. The target has been fully liquidated. He believes the story completely. Wire transfer for your final payment is en route. I'll be in touch regarding Phase 2 once I've tied up the loose ends here. He's starting to talk about rebuilding, so I'll need to accelerate the exit plan. I stared at the screen, the words swimming in front of me. The target. Liquidated. He believes the story. Exit plan. I was the target. Our life, our love, our 20 years together, it wasn't a partnership. It was a project. The illness wasn't a tragedy. It was phase 1 of an operation. And the miracle cure wasn't a miracle. It was the successful completion of a heist. The woman I loved, the angel I had sacrificed my entire world for, did not exist. I was living with a stranger, a brilliant, ruthless con artist, and I had been her willing, loving, and most profitable mark. The discovery on that tablet was not like flipping a switch. It was like the floor of my entire reality had suddenly turned to glass, revealing a bottomless black abyss beneath me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My mind reeled, desperately trying to reject the information, to find some other explanation, any other explanation. But the words on the screen were clinical, unambiguous, and absolute. The target has been fully liquidated. I was the target. The love of my life, the woman for whom I had just burned my entire existence to the ground, viewed me not as her husband, but as a financial asset to be drained. My grief was so profound it was a physical force, a crushing weight on my chest that made it impossible to stand. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor of our cheap rental apartment, the tablet still glowing in my hands, a monument to my own catastrophic stupidity. The rage came next, a white-hot volcanic fury that burned away the shock and the sorrow. It was a rage directed not just at her, but at myself. How could I have been so blind? I replayed the last year in my head, but now every memory was recontextualized, every tender moment tainted and twisted into a grotesque parody. Her brave smiles through the pain were not courage. They were the smirks of a master manipulator. Her tears of gratitude were not genuine. They were crocodile tears for a fool she was expertly fleecing. Her every touch, every word of love was a calculated move in a long con, designed to keep me devoted, compliant, and unsuspecting. The sheer, diabolical brilliance of the plan was as horrifying as the betrayal itself. The terminal illness was the perfect weapon. It was emotionally unassailable. Who would question a dying wife? Who would scrutinize the desperate, loving actions of a husband trying to save her? She had used the deepest, most sacred part of our relationship, my unconditional love for her, as the primary tool of my own destruction. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I was a man operating in enemy territory, and I had just discovered the person sleeping next to me was a spy. I needed more than just a deleted email thread. I needed a map of her entire conspiracy. I needed to understand the full scope of the operation before I acted, And so I began my own performance. I pretended that nothing had changed. I continued to play the part of the loving, relieved husband, celebrating our miracle and talking about our future, all while a cold, methodical fury was crystallizing in my heart. My life became a covert operation. While she was out, I became a digital archaeologist, sifting through the ruins of our life for clues. I used the information from the email to start my investigation. Caspian. I ran his name through every search engine, every social media platform. I found him. He was handsome, slick, with a social media profile filled with pictures of exotic travel, expensive cars, and a lifestyle that suggested old money or new illicit wealth. He presented himself as a strategic investment consultant, a con man. I found a hidden, locked-down profile of Lyra's under an alias. The profile picture was of the two of them, smiling on a beach somewhere tropical, a picture taken months before her diagnosis. This wasn't a new development. They had a history. They were partners. My next step was to follow the money. This was the part of our life that she had always managed, the area I had so willingly ceded to her control. I hired a discreet forensic accountant, a man I paid in cash, explaining that I suspected my business partner had been embezzling from me, a lie that felt sickeningly close to the truth. I gave him the details of the Swiss bank account for the clinic and the name of the financial services company from the letter she had hidden. The accountant went to work, and what he uncovered was the blueprint of the heist. The clinic Edelweiss was a ghost. The website was hosted on an anonymous server, the address in Switzerland was a mail forwarding service, and Dr. Ulrich Weber had no medical license, no publications, no existence outside of their fabricated digital world. The bank account was real, but it was just a pass-through. Of the millions I had transferred, only a small fraction had stayed there. The vast majority had been immediately rerouted through a dizzying series of offshore shell corporations, a classic money laundering technique designed to make the funds untraceable. But my accountant was good. He managed to follow one of the larger threads to its final destination, a newly opened investment account in the Cayman Islands. The account was under a corporate name, but the two signatories on the account were Lyra, using her maiden name, and Caspian. This was their endgame. The money hadn't been spent on a phantom cure. It had been washed, hidden, and was now sitting in a tax-free haven, waiting for them to start their new life. The evidence was irrefutable, a cold, hard chain of digital and financial proof. I had the emails detailing the plan, the social media history proving their prior relationship, and the financial records showing the theft and laundering of the funds. My grief had now been completely superseded by a grim, laser-focused mission. This was no longer just about a personal betrayal. This was about a major felony, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. I was preparing for a war. I chose the moment of confrontation with care. It was the one-year anniversary of the day we had received her diagnosis. I wanted the symmetry of the occasion to be a final, cruel twist of the knife. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply laid out my evidence on our small dining room table, just as I had seen it done in movies, a series of exhibits in the trial of our marriage. Exhibit a printout of her email with Caspian, the one where she called me the target. Exhibit B, a photo of her and Caspian on the beach. Exhibit C, the forensic accountant's report, a thick, bound document detailing the money trail from our life savings to their offshore account. I waited for her to come home. When she walked in, I was sitting at the table, my hands clasped in front of me. She saw the documents, and her face, for the first time since I had known her, was a mask of pure, undisguised panic. The performance was over. The curtain had come down. "The Edelweiss project," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I have to admit it was brilliantly executed. You should be proud." She stared at the papers, her mind visibly racing, searching for an escape route, a new lie that could contain this. But there was none. She was cornered by the truth. "How?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You never checked anything. You always trusted me." "Yes," I said. That was the central design flaw in your plan. You assumed the target would remain a target forever. You underestimated him. She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something truly terrifying. There was no remorse, no shame, no flicker of the woman I thought I had loved. Her panic was being replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. It was the anger of a predator whose prey had unexpectedly fought back. "You were always so weak," she spat, her voice laced with a venom I had never heard before. "So sentimental, crying over a house. It was just a pile of bricks. I was freeing you from it, freeing us. The money was going to give us a real life, a life of freedom, not this pathetic little suburban dream you were so proud of." "Us?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You mean you and Caspian? Was he part of the plan from the beginning, or did you bring him in after you realized you couldn't pull it off alone?" "Caspian understands that the world belongs to people who are smart enough to take it," she said, her chin jutting out in defiance. "You just build things. We own things. It's a different level of thinking." The confession, in its shameless arrogance, was the final nail in the coffin of the woman I had once loved. She wasn't just a thief. She was a true sociopath, incapable of empathy, remorse, or love. My entire 20-year marriage had been a lie, a long-term strategic partnership with a predator who had been waiting for the right moment to cash out. I stood up from the table, my own composure absolute. "I'm glad you feel that way," I said, "because the kind of thinking you and Caspian practice has a name. It's called conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And the places it leads to are not private islands in the Caymans, they are federal prisons." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. It was already connected to a call. "I hope you got all of that, detective," I said into the phone. "She's confessed to everything." A team of plainclothes police officers, who had been waiting in an unmarked car down the street, entered the apartment. The look on Lyra's face as they put her in handcuffs was not one of sadness or heartbreak. It was the pure, unadulterated rage of a brilliant strategist who had been outmaneuvered. It was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. The aftermath was a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and a profound, soul-shattering emptiness. The arrest of Lyra and Caspian became a minor local news sensation, a sordid little story of love, lies, and a multi-million-dollar fraud. I was the victim, a title I wore with a deep and abiding sense of shame. I had to give statements, sit for depositions, and testify in court, publicly narrating the story of my own epic stupidity. The trial laid bare the entire sickening conspiracy. Caspian was a professional con artist who targeted wealthy individuals, and Lyra had been his partner for years. My marriage, it turned out, was her long con, a stable cover while she helped him with other schemes. The Edelweiss project was to be their masterpiece, their retirement score. They had used my love and my life's work as their personal ATM. They were both found guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. They were sentenced to significant prison terms, a just and righteous outcome that provided me with absolutely no satisfaction. The money, of course, was gone. By the time the authorities froze the offshore accounts, they had been emptied, the funds scattered to the digital winds, likely in untraceable cryptocurrency. The legal system had given me justice, but it could not give me back my life. And so I was left alone in a cheap apartment with nothing but the clothes on my back and the crushing weight of my own history. I was not just bankrupt. I was spiritually and emotionally hollowed out. Every memory I had from the past 20 years was now a lie. Our wedding day, our anniversaries, every "I love you." It was all part of the performance. The person I had built my world around did not exist and never had. I had been in love with a ghost, a carefully constructed character played by a monster. The first year was a descent into a deep, dark abyss. I was consumed by a toxic cocktail of rage, grief, and self-loathing. I drifted through my days in a fog, unable to work, unable to connect with anyone. I was a man untethered from his own past, with no map for the future. The temptation to simply give up, to let the darkness consume me, was a constant, seductive whisper. The turning point was not a single, dramatic moment of clarity, but a slow, painful crawl back into the light. It started with a simple, practical necessity. I had to work to survive. I took a low-level drafting job at a large, impersonal corporate firm, a humbling step down from the life I had once known. But the routine, the simple act of showing up and doing a job, was a lifeline. It forced me out of my apartment and out of my own head. It gave me a small, fragile sense of purpose. I started going to therapy, not a relationship counselor, but a trauma specialist. I learned to separate Lyra the character from Lyra the con artist. I had to grieve the woman I thought I loved, to mourn her as if she had truly died, while simultaneously holding the real woman accountable for her crimes. It was a complex and painful process of emotional surgery, cutting out the cancerous parts of my past without destroying myself in the process. I had to forgive myself. This was the hardest part. I had to accept that I was not stupid, I was trusting. I was not weak, I was loving. She had not exploited a flaw in my character, she had weaponized my greatest strengths. My capacity for love and devotion was not something to be ashamed of. It was something she had been pathologically incapable of understanding. This realization was the key that unlocked my prison. Years passed. I never returned to the world of high-end architecture. The passion I once had for building grand houses was gone. Instead, I found a new calling. I left the corporate firm and started working for a nonprofit organization that designed and built affordable, sustainable housing for low-income families. I used my skills not to create monuments to wealth, but to provide shelter and security for people who had none. The work was challenging, the pay was modest, but for the first time in a very long time, it was meaningful. I found a different kind of wealth in the grateful eyes of a family receiving the keys to their first home. It was a foundation I could believe in. I built a new life for myself, a smaller, quieter, but infinitely more authentic one. It was a life built not on the grand illusion of a perfect love, but on the simple, solid truths of hard work, service to others, and a hard-won sense of self-reliance. I learned that the ultimate foundation is not something you build with a partner. It's something you must first build within yourself. The love I had for Lyra was real, even if hers was a lie. The sacrifice I made was a testament to the man I was, not the fool she made me out to be. The fire she started burned my world to the ground, but in the ashes I found an opportunity to build something new, something that could never be taken from me again, a life of my own. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Whispers. We've all faced moments when everything felt broken. What was your turning point? Leave it in the comments, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.